Welcome to Think About It with your host, Jaden Miller.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining me on Think About It with Jaden Miller. Welcome back, everybody, to my podcast. Glad that you guys are with me again. Today is Wednesday, and as you know, I drop new episodes every Wednesday and Sunday. All right, so don't forget to like, share, and subscribe on my YouTube channel, and follow, comment, share, tell your friends about my podcast. You can listen on your favorite podcast platform. All right, so today we're going to continue with our discussion on who was the best American president since 1960. All right, so part one was on Sunday. We talked about the contributions and achievements of John F. Kennedy, Lyndon Baines Johnson, Richard M. Nixon, Gerald R. Ford, Jimmy Carter, and of course Ronald Wilson Reagan. You guys are probably saying, how do you know all of this stuff? How do you know these guys' middle names? Okay, well, you know, I taught American government, of course, and I am a history buff. I always loved government. So, and then when I was in grammar school, it was a requirement that we knew who the president was and who the members of the cabinet were, who the members of the United States Supreme Court were, and also who were the members of the House of Representatives from our state, but also our national leaders, U.S. senators, and again, the Speaker of the House and that kind of thing. So that was really important. And it was just something that I grasped onto as a kid. So some of you all might have liked algebra or math or something like that. For me, it was government. Always has been. All right. So since we talked about those presidents, now we're going to start with Ronald Reagan's vice president who became president. And that would be George Herbert Walker Bush. All right. So what were some achievements of his as we continue down the line to our most recent past president. And then I'm going to share with you who I feel the best president was since 1960. All right. Now, again, I told you during the last episode that, it may seem unfair. Barack Obama hasn't had 30 or 40 years, that has transpired. Well, we can look back and determine where he lands in history in terms of his accomplishments, and the same thing for Donald J. Trump. So, but again, this is just academic. We're just trying something here, just to see what we think. All right. So we've got George Herbert Walker Bush. He was elected president back in 1987. Took office in 88. So one of his most prominent accomplishments was he passed or signed into law the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. Now, I'm going to tell you why that's really important and how you can associate the ADA with what you see when you go for a walk, okay? When I was a kid and I went for a walk on sidewalks, all right, well, when you crossed the street, you had to step up onto the sidewalk, okay? Now, think about this for a minute. What about people that are in wheelchairs? Well, what about people that are on crutches or have some kind of a disability that, keeps them from walking in a normal fashion? Well, this law that was signed into existence by President Bush now caused municipalities to alter crosswalks so that now people that have disabilities, those that are in wheelchairs, can now cross, the sidewalk and not have to worry about how do they then get over this big major hump, all right? So that was a major accomplishment. I mean, it did so much more than just sidewalks, of course, but this act impacted over 43 million Americans. All right. When he signed this a law into effect, which was back in July 1990. It gave people with handicap access to facilities and prohibited discrimination in employment, public accommodations, and transportation. So now again, in a bus, if there's a handicapped person that needs to ride a public transportation, think about it. How are they supposed to get on the bus? Okay, well, they can't step up like you and I do. So now there are these lifts that are on bus that are make riding public transportation accessible to handicapped people. How many of you all really knew that? There are probably a lot of people that didn't know that, right? All right, so again, now you know, all right? Here, let's talk about this. When it came to allowing for people with disabilities to have access, over the next few decades, since that law was passed, or that act was passed, doors, stairs, I mentioned sidewalks, signage, and employment laws were revised across the country in response to this legislation. All right. So again, that's the impact that George Herbert Walker Bush had on that significant piece of legislation that was signed into law. All right. That's really, really major. All right. What else? Well, he sanctioned this Desert Storm operation to liberate Kuwait. All right. So again, back in 1990, President Saddam Hussein was the president of Iraq. All right. And what Saddam Hussein did was he invaded Kuwait. All right. And now, there are people that said that he did that for a number of reasons. Well, one was, to take over the oil production in Kuwait. But this was not a good move in the Middle East, because when you have countries that destabilize regions, okay, it causes a ripple effect throughout the entire world. So what George Herbert Walker Bush did was he imposed economic sanctions on Iraq, and he assembled a multinational coalition in opposition to the invasion. All right. So this military operation was called Desert Storm. All right. And the purpose was to remove Iraqi forces from Kuwait. All right. And so after about 5 weeks of air offensive and bombing of Baghdad, which is the capital of Iraq, the U.S.-led coalition forces marched into Kuwait, driving out the Iraqi forces. All right. So a few days later, a ceasefire was arranged. All right. And then the United Nations passed a resolution establishing a peacekeeping force in a demilitarized zone between Kuwait and Iraq. All right. So this was a victory, all right, for the international forces led by George Herbert Walker Bush and the American troops. All right. Because again, we don't want a destabilized Middle East. All right. During his presidency, he was very instrumental in ending the Cold War peacefully. All right. So if you know anything about the Cold War, this is something that developed right after World War II. All right. So you know that America and Russia was fighting on the same side during World War II. But when America dropped those bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, okay, thus ending World War II, that made Russia extremely nervous about the military might of the United States. And therefore, you had these two countries with these major militaries in this, monolith of strength to begin to look at each other out of the side of their eyes, sad-eyed, wondering if the United States could do what it did to Japan. Could it do that to the Soviet Union? Okay. And then America started to feel that way. Well, the Soviet forces were pretty strong. Could they develop, some kind of a weapon, okay, an atomic bomb or hydrogen bomb that could do the same to the United States? And so this Cold War was in effect for a number of years. All right. Now, although Ronald Reagan is often commended for ending the Cold War, The ultimate collapse of the Soviet communism occurred during the presidency of George Herbert Walker Bush. So, of course, Ronald Reagan, certainly had a lot to do with it, but it actually ended. The Cold War ended during George Bush's term. So after the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, Bush met with this now Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, who I actually got to meet in person once. Yes, I did. I met Mikhail Gorbachev. But anyway, that's a story for another time. But during their summit, they got together, but during their summit, they both declared an end to the Cold War. All right. And due to this, there was now a reunification or a push for a reunification of Germany, because as you know, after World War II, there was a West Germany and there was an East Germany. West Germany being a democracy, or more of a democracy, and East Germany being communist. And so there was a reunification of Germany, all right? And then after this summit, Bush continued to have cooperative relations with the Soviet Union throughout the rest of his term, okay? And then also during this time, Bush and Mikhail Gorbachev, also signed the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, which was the largest and most complex arms control treaty in history. All right. So those are just some of the major accomplishments of George Herbert Walker Bush. All right. You know that he only had one term in office. All right. He lost to the person that I'm going to talk about next, which is President Clinton, William Jefferson Clinton. All right. And a lot of people say that this happened because he raised taxes, which he promised that he would not do. And the economy started to slip some under George Herbert Walker Bush. All right. So that's George Bush. Let's talk about this next president that came after him. And that would be President Clinton. Again, William Jefferson Clinton, better known as Bill Clinton. All right. What were some of his accomplishments? Well, I'll tell you, but you have to promise that you will like, share, and subscribe on my YouTube channel, and that you will continue to follow, that you will share, that you will comment, tell people about my podcast, and of course, you can listen to it on your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget, we drop new episodes every Wednesday and Thursday. All right, so again, we're talking about the best, or at least in your opinion, I'm going to share my opinion, who was the best American president, who had the most achievements, who had the most accomplishments, who maybe had the most impact, all right, since 1960. We've gone through a plethora of the presidents from 1960 onward. We just talked about George Herbert Walker Bush. Now we're going to talk about Bill Clinton, all right? Bill Clinton did a lot. I'm just going to be very frank and honest with you, okay? During President Clinton's term, it was the longest economic expansion in American history, okay? President Clinton's strategy of fiscal discipline, open foreign markets, and investments in the American people helped create the conditions for a record 115 months of economic expansion. The economy has grown at an average of 4% per year since 1993 during his term, all right? There were more than 22 million new jobs created. All right. This was this happened in less than 8 years, and at the time was the most ever under a single administration, and more than were created in the previous 12 years. All right. So this is what Bill Clinton did. Those things in and of themselves are important. He had the highest home ownership in American history. All right. A strong economy and fiscal discipline kept interest rates low, making it possible for more families to buy homes. The home ownership rate increased from 64.2% in 1992, all right, which is when he first took office after George Herbert Walker Bush. Remember, I told you the economy started to slip under him, to 67.7%, the highest rate ever. Under Bill Clinton, there was the lowest unemployment in 30 years, okay? Unemployment dropped from more than 7% in 1993 to just 4.0% in November 2000. Unemployment for African Americans and Hispanics fell to the lowest rates on record, and the rate for women is the lowest in more than 40 years. All right. Under Bill Clinton, he raised education standards, increased school choice, and doubled education and training investment. All right. Since 1992, reading and math scores increased for 4th, 8th, and 12th graders. Math SAT scores were at a 30-year high. The number of charter schools grew from 1 to more than 2,000. 49 states had put in place standards in core subjects, and federal investment in education and training doubled. All right. We're talking about Bill Clinton. All right. Under Bill Clinton's term, he connected 95% of schools to the internet. All right. This is important because the internet was really just starting to be utilized by a good amount of American citizens in about 1993, 1994. All right. So President Clinton and his Vice President Al Gore, their new commitment to education technology increased educational technology funding, and it increased the percentage of schools connected to the internet from 35% in 1994 to 95% in 1999. In just those short amount of years, 5 years, all right, they were able to connect the internet to a majority of the schools in the United States. All right. Here, these next things are also very, very important. All right. Under President Clinton, there was the lowest crime rate in 26 years because of his comprehensive anti-crime strategy of tough penalties, more police, and smart prevention, as well as common sense gun safety laws. The overall crime rate declined for 8 consecutive years, the longest continuous drop on record, and is at the lowest level since 1973. To go along with that, he put 100,000 more police officers on the streets. As a part of his 1994 crime bill, he enacted a new initiative to fund 100,000 community police officers. To date, more than 11,000 law enforcement agents have received COPS funding. All right. He signed into law the Family and Medical Leave Act for 20 million Americans. What is that about? Okay. Well, over 20 million Americans have taken unpaid leave to care for a newborn child or sick family member. All right. See, before this law was enacted, you could be fired. You know, isn't that unfair? Okay. So you need time away to take care of your child, but they won't hold your position for you. Okay. Well, this act says that no, you will hold their position for them for a specified period of time. Well, true, you may not have to pay them, okay, but they still will have employment when their family medical leave is over. All right. There is the smallest welfare rolls in 32 years. All right. He pledged to end welfare as we know it and signed landmark bipartisan welfare reform legislation in 1996. All right. So again, there is a reduction in the amount of welfare. Welfare was never intended for people to live on all their lives. Welfare was intended for people that were having a hard time to be able to feed their families. All right. And to be able to provide them with the necessary things to get them back on their feet. All right. Under Bill Clinton, there was the lowest poverty rate in 20 years. All right. There was the lowest teen birth rate in 60 years. There was the lowest infant mortality rate in American history. All right. Under Bill Clinton, they deactivated more than 1,700 nuclear warheads from the former Soviet Union. All right. Now, there are some things that I remember about Bill Clinton. These things, of course, the things that certainly stick to me is the decrease in the crime rate and the COPS funding for 100,000 more police officers. But also, you know, I bought, I think, at least a couple of homes when Bill Clinton was in office, okay, because the interest rates were so low, all right. But also in terms of, you know, savings and that kind of thing. I mean, the economy was really, really rolling along under Bill Clinton. I mean, we can talk about, you know, that he had the lowest federal income tax burden in 35 years. We can say that, you know, he had the most diverse cabinet in American history. All those things are really, really important. But from 1993 when he took office until 2000 when he left office, or 2001 rather, when the next president took over, America did extremely well under Bill Clinton. Now, some of you all are probably thinking, well, you know what? We already know who you're going to choose, you know, who you feel is the best president since 1960. But I'm going to tell you, give you a little hint. It's not Bill Clinton, at least not in my opinion. I think all of these things are great, okay? But I'm not saying that because of these things, he was the best president since 1960. I have somebody else in mind. So I may shock you. All right. But then again, there are some of you all that probably think you know. I'm going to again tell you, you're wrong. Okay. All right. So after Bill Clinton, who did we have? Well, we had, I always like to refer to him as the second George Bush. All right. So this would have been George Herbert Walker Bush's son, George W. Bush. All right. Now, I'm going to be very frank with you. I didn't care for George Bush too much. All right. I mean, he might have done a little something, but, you know, a lot changed under him. Okay. And not necessarily due to him. Okay. But of course, 9/11 happened under George Walker Bush's administration. And I believe initially things were handled well, but you know, afterwards things were not handled very well because there was actual, you know, some untruths told to the world about, you know, what happened and whether or not Iraq was involved in it and whether or not there should have been an invasion of Iraq. But, you know, when it comes to his accomplishments, they are very, very few. And again, not necessarily all because of him. You know, of course, he had, at least we hope that he had no idea that, you know, 9/11, that those towers would be attacked, you know, by those airplanes. So he spent quite a bit of his term dealing with war or being involved in war, okay, which left not so much ability to handle things domestically when you're so involved in things that are happening internationally. But I'll tell you one thing that does stand out. In January 2002, President Bush signed the No Child Left Behind Act, which brought in considerable reforms in the education system and changed the curriculum of public elementary, middle, and high schools in the United States. All right. And so under this law, there was mandatory administration of annual tests from state schools in order to gauge skills and monitor the progress of the performance of students. That's a good thing, okay? We want to be able to determine whether or not the strategies we use to educate our kids here in the United States are effective, okay? So we have to give him that. Absolutely. I don't take anything away from that. That's a great thing. You know, he launched the president's emergency plan for AIDS relief, you know, back during this time, not only in the United States, but in other areas of the world. AIDS was a significant problem, okay, for a lot of countries and, of course, for a lot of people here in the United States, all right? So due to him launching this plan, money was diverted into helping those people that had AIDS, not just in the United States, but globally. All right. So we have to give him credit for that. All right. But that list is very short, folks, and I apologize, but it is. It's very, very short. That's it. Under George W. Bush, coming into President Obama's administration, the nation suffered a lot economically. Interest rates had started to go up. You know, there were some major companies that folded or were about to fold under George W. Bush. And it was about time to see him go. The United States was looking for some change. And that change came under the presidency of Barack Obama. All right. You all already know that Barack Obama was the first African-American president. Okay. I celebrate him because, even though he wasn't born in the city of Chicago, Barack Obama spent quite a bit of time in Chicago. All right. He, of course, was educated elsewhere. He went to Harvard and, got a law degree, of course. But then he brought all of that education and all of that goodwill to the state of Illinois. He started off as a community activist. He became a member of the Illinois Senate, became a member of the United States Senate, and then became president of the United States. All right. One of the younger, the youngest presidents that was elected. But he's really, really known for this. All right. Again, George W. Bush left the country in a bad state. All right. So he took the necessary steps to bring the economy out of recession. All right. Many of you all may be too young, but those of you all that are older might remember that in 2008, there was a big housing bubble burst. I'm sorry, not a bubble, but it burst. Okay. There are homes all across the United States that people couldn't afford anymore. It was just the worst financial crisis since the 1930s. And this ended under George W. Bush's term. And it came into President Obama's term. So what could he do? He had to turn things around. All right. So as I just mentioned, it was actually called the subprime mortgage crisis, had a ripple effect on the entire economy, rendering several people, not several people, but many people unemployed and homeless. All right. The Obama administration took a number of steps to address the depression, including the passage of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, an $800 billion stimulus spending and tax cut bill. Why do we have stimulus plans? When we have stimulus, think about it. All right, what is the word stimulate? It's to stimulate. So what we need to do in order to get the economy rolling again is we need to pump money into it. We need to give people money so that they can spend, okay? All right, that's how we keep our economy rolling. Well, if people aren't spending money, then the government can't get money for taxes, okay? What are companies going to do? They depend on you coming in and purchasing things, all right? So it has a major impact. So we need to stimulate the economy. So that's what he did. He put in $800 billion stimulus spending and tax cut bill. And the 2010 Tax Relief Act, an $850 billion bill with payroll, income, and alternative minimum tax cuts, along with an extension of unemployment benefits. All right. So again, I've talked to you all about this. This isn't about politics. All right. You need a stimulus plan in order to get the economy rolling. Okay. So for those of you that want to make it political and say, oh, that was Barack Obama, he's a Democrat. And then I'll just come back and say, well, didn't Donald Trump do the same thing? He's a Republican. Didn't he put into effect stimulus plans in order to stimulate the economy? Yes, he did. Okay. So again, this is things that he needed to do. Also, okay, he successfully rescued the troubled automotive industry by renewing loans for General Motors and Chrysler. All right. If he would not have done this, General Motors and Chrysler were done. Okay. They were gone. All right. He allowed the Federal Reserve to take drastic steps to rejuvenate the economy. Okay. And it was because of these things the United States successfully recovered from the recession during his 8-year presidency. All right. Again, a lot of this recession, financial economic issues started under the George Bush administration. And I can tell you, if you go back, we talked about President Clinton. Okay. Well, think about it for a minute. Under President Clinton, this country had no debt for the first time in many years. All right. No debt. All right. The United States had a surplus in money. Okay. Until George W. Bush took office. Now, again, I don't blame him for everything. 9/11 happened under his watch. All right. But the amount of spending, okay, that happened under George W. Bush, the amount of waste that happened under him, and not really paying attention to what was happening domestically and primarily looking at what's happening internationally was his downfall and hurt a lot of Americans. All right. Well, when Obama took office, the unemployment rate was at 7.8%. It peaked at 10% in October 2009 and didn't drop below 9% for 2 succeeding years. However, by the time Obama left office, the unemployment rate had dropped 3 full percentage points to 4.8%. Moreover, this was well below the historical norm of 5.6%. All right. The inflation adjusted incomes of American households reached the highest level ever recorded under President Obama. The median household income reached almost $60,000 in 2016, an increase of $2,900 or 5.3% as compared to when he took office before he took office, and this happened under George W. Bush in 2008. All right. And as a consequence of increase in incomes, there was a decrease in the poverty rate. Okay. The poverty rate under the Obama administration decreased from 13.2% in 2008 prior to him taking office to 12.7% in 2016, a drop of 0.5%. All right. So those are some accomplishments of Obama. All right. Well, he also significantly decreased the number of Americans who lacked insurance. All right. On March 23rd of 2010, President Obama signed into law the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare. All right. Now, I know a lot of people don't like Obamacare because they feel as though that takes the power away from the individual and gives it, or not only to the individual, but also to insurance companies and thus, all right, or private industry, and makes it mandatory, that people have medical coverage. Well, I asked the question, shouldn't all Americans have some form of health insurance? What is the problem with having it? All right. I don't know. That's something that, people have debated back and forth. Okay. Well, the increased coverage in Obamacare was due to an expansion of Medicaid eligibility and due to major changes to individual insurance markets. Okay. This was the most significant regulatory overhaul and expansion of the United States healthcare system since the passage of Medicare and Medicaid in 1965. All right. So a lot of Americans lacked health insurance. All right. And in fact, there were 43.8 million Americans of all ages who lacked health insurance. All right. Well, when he left office, the number had decreased to 28.6 million in 2016, a drop of 15.2 million people. All right. So the percentage of all U.S. residents who lacked coverage dropped from 14.7% in 2008 prior to him taking office to 9.0% in 2016, the lowest percentage on record. All right. There's many other accomplishments. Solar and wind energy more than quadrupled under the Obama administration. All right. Under his administration, Al-Qaeda terrorist Osama bin Laden was killed. All right. He improved the United States relations with Iran and Cuba. All right. He is regarded as the most pro-LGBTQ president in the United States. All right. He signed the Don't Ask, Don't Tell Repeal Act. All right. This act allowed the gay, lesbian, and bisexual people to serve openly in the United States Armed Forces. All right. In 2012, Obama became the first sitting American president to publicly support for the legalization of same-sex marriage. All right. He became the first American president in office to call for full equality for gay Americans. All right. So these are just some of the accomplishments. And I say that regardless of whatever our religious beliefs are. I'm just talking about what his accomplishments are. All right. And those are accomplishments to a certain segment of the United States public. All right. So again, for me, this isn't about politics. It's about stating what this person's accomplishments were. Okay. Regardless of politics. All right. Well, after we have President Bush, we have Donald Trump. All right. And so let's talk about some of his accomplishments. And again, I'm going to state first, like, share, and subscribe on my YouTube channel. Follow, comment, and continue to share and tell people about my podcast. Think About It with Jaden Miller on your favorite podcast platform. All right. So lastly, we have Donald Trump. All right. Donald J. Trump. Well, I'll say that his 4 years in office were certainly entertaining. Okay. And there was a lot that went on. Okay. And, he certainly was different than the 44 presidents before him. Okay. In many, many ways. Now, you can argue, well, everybody's different, but we must admit that Donald Trump certainly put a different spin on the United States presidency. All right. But let's talk about some of his accomplishments. First, he passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. What this did was the United States expected to cut about $1.5 trillion in taxes over the next 10 years. All right. That is about $150 billion every year, the fourth largest since 1940. That's good. I like for taxes to be cut for the right reasons. Okay. So I think that's a good thing. There were some achievements in terms of job creation. All right. The United States of America had created several millions of jobs since 2017. Many of those jobs were in the manufacturing sector, which saw about 400,000 manufacturing jobs in the period Donald Trump was in office. Remember, I just talked about the economic stimulus package under the Obama era? Well, guess what? All right. The same thing happened under Donald Trump. All right. He supervised successive years of stellar job growth figures based upon the economic stimulus package from President Obama. And so what I'm saying in a nice way is that Obama put into practice, or actually put it into motion, this successive, years of stellar job growth. Donald Trump was the recipient of that and kept it going. So that's a really, really good thing. All right. He increased American exports. He opened several avenues for American goods and services to be exported abroad. All right. He famously secured a deal with Beijing for American beef and rice to be exported to China. All right. It was really, really good because there are so many imports, okay, into the United States from China. They were taking advantage, or taking for granted, the United States, and not accepting very, very many imports into China. All right. And so what he did was he dealt with China, okay, and halted China from illegally dumping aluminum foil in the United States. There had become a trade war with China, but Donald Trump forced Beijing, China, to come to the negotiation table by expertly imposing a series of economic tariffs on China. Really, really good. That showed some leadership. All right. That's great. He helped guarantee America's energy future. All right. He accelerated the swift implementation of programs that cemented America's dominance in the coal, oil, and natural gas markets. He increased spending in the military. All right. Those were some very, very good things too. So, my favorite president since 1960, the one that I feel has accomplished the most, is Lyndon Baines Johnson, LBJ. Now, I told you guys during our last episode, LBJ came from a time where, he said some ugly things about black people, okay, and probably signed some things or voted for some things that weren't necessarily great. But there was a change in him after he became vice president under John F. Kennedy, and then became president as a result of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Okay. And I'm going to just tell you that the two things that I think were the most important that have had an impact on so many people since they were signed. All right. So very simply for me, it's the passing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. All right, I say that is so important because if that would not have been passed, I mean, of course, we can believe and hope that the country would have changed, all right? But this was the impetus, all right, which meant that, guess what? I can now, as an African-American person, go to the same movie theaters as someone that is white. All right, I can sit in the same restaurants. See, that might be hard for those of you that are younger to believe that, black people and white people couldn't eat at the same counters. We couldn't eat in the same restaurants, all right? If we went to the same movie theaters, black people had a certain section that they had to sit in, okay? That's a reality in this country, okay? And it's because of the passage of this Civil Rights Act that black kids and white kids can sit next to each other in a classroom, okay? That's one reason, all right? It's so important, all right, that this had passed because the United States could certainly look so much different had it not, okay? And then secondly, it's the passing of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, all right? Again, what this did was it removed all barriers in some southern states that prevented African Americans from voting. All right, my argument is really simply this, okay? How can we call ourselves one nation? And let's do it again. What does the pledge say? Some kids say it every single day. They get up, put their hands over their heart. When you go to a baseball game, a basketball or a game or a football game, what do you say? We sing the national anthem, but in school, what do? We pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. I'll say it again. One nation. Is it a divided nation? It doesn't say that. It says one nation under God. This is the one passage I want you to remember. It says one nation under God, indivisible. That's all I need to hear, okay? For those of you that have some religious belief, it says one nation under God, okay? One nation. So how can we have several nations, or how can we have a nation that discriminates against one segment of people or multiple segments of people and then call it from God? Think about it. Answer that question for me, okay? How can you go to church on Sunday and say, oh, I believe in this and I pray for this, but yet there's a separation in our nation for some people? Don't seem right to me. So one nation under God, indivisible. That means we're not divided. Okay, so it says that right there, one nation under God, indivisible. That's enough for me. Okay, that should be enough for you. And obviously that was enough for Lyndon Baines Johnson and the 77 members of the United States Senate that voted to get rid of these things that prevented African Americans from voting. Those are so important to me. All right. All right, what else did he do? Well, he appointed the first African American to the Supreme Court, Thurgood Marshall. That was definitely important. He is the first president to really heavily invest in education. All right. So how can the United States of America be called the greatest nation in America, but yet we have people that don't know their ABCs, that we have illiterate people in our nation? Okay. That's unacceptable. And so he did every single thing that needed to be happened in order to improve. Here is this other thing that many of you all may not have known. He signed into law the Public Broadcasting Act. Ever watch PBS, public broadcasting? Yes. He's responsible for the funding to make that come into fruition. He invested in humanities. He invested money in the arts. Okay. That is so important that we be a well-rounded nation. All right. And all of these things happened under Lyndon Baines Johnson during a time of great upheaval in this country based upon the issues we were having with the division of race. He changed all of that by stating that Americans have to do better. Hey, he passed the Civil Rights Act of 1968 to grant equitable housing opportunities to all Americans, regardless of race, creed, or national origin. He signed into law the Fair Housing Act in 1968. So now there's a reason why black people and white people and Latinos and whomever can live next door to each other. Because if he wouldn't have signed this into law, it would still be it could still be a reality in this country that we still have all of this division. All right. So you can't talk about we're a great melting pot. Okay. And you can't call us all Americans one. Okay. Or demand that we call ourselves that, but yet people are still divided and don't have equal opportunities like everybody else. All right. So this is why I feel Lyndon Baines Johnson has had the most impact, that he has been the greatest president in terms of his achievements and in terms of his impact on the United States. Did I mention the reduction of poverty? How he put into effect a number of different civil and social programs, all right, to help people out of poverty. All right, he started a war against poverty. Yes, there are some bad things under LBJ. We can talk about Vietnam. Yep, he did. He was involved in that. He certainly was. Okay. All right. So we can take that away from him. All right. But that's not enough to have a major impact on his achievements and accomplishments and the things that he brought forth to the United States during his short term in office. I mean, he finished out John F. Kennedy's, term because he was assassinated. And then he had his own 4 years in office. But that's a lot to be accomplished in 6 or 7 years. All right. So that's why, in my opinion, President Lyndon Baines Johnson had the most impact, had the most achievements, had the most accomplishments or at least since 1960. All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Think About It with Jaden Miller. Hey, why don't you comment? Why don't you send me who you feel is your best president since 1960? Let's talk about it. Let's think about it. All right. Again, thank you guys for joining me. I drop new episodes every Wednesday and Sunday. Look forward to the next one on Sunday. I have the beautiful, my wife, Tanisha. She's been in the background listening in on my conversation here. No, on our conversation. She's great. I always love to have her here with me. She's my motivation. She's my ace boom coom. I've been trying to say all day and got it wrong. All right. All right. So again, thank you guys. Like, share, and what is it? Like, share, and subscribe on my YouTube channel. I'm just really falling apart here. Today is Wednesday. We had a 3-day work week. Yay. And I'm so excited for this 4 days that I've got off. So yes, folks, like, share, and subscribe on my YouTube channel, and follow, comment, share. Tell all of your friends about the podcast. Please continue to listen. Thank you guys. I will see you next time on Think About It with Jaden Miller. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Think About It with Jaden Miller. Don't forget to like and subscribe to his YouTube channel, and like and follow on your favorite podcast platform.